The story of Nauru, a tiny country in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that got rich by selling bird feces to the entire world. It became one of the richest countries in the world, and just 20 years later, almost the poorest country in the world. And in order to survive after such a sharp economic collapse, Nauru ends up involved in questionable and at times openly dirty schemes. A country that only recently was swimming in money, within a single generation begins to follow only one principle. If they pay for it, we agree. After World War II, Australian scientists discover huge deposits of phosphates on this island, and the island's government begins spending the money that suddenly fell into their hands as if the country's budget were a $1 billion gift certificate that expires tomorrow. For an island with an area of 21 square kilometers and a population of about 10,000 people, this is not just good income, these are disproportionate and almost absurd amounts. I will show you the reckless and expensive purchases they make, each of which is literally a setup for a joke. But first I will answer one question that is probably already spinning in your head. The ocean is enormous. There are plenty of birds. Hundreds of islands. Why didn't other islands in the Pacific Ocean get rich by selling fossilized bird poop to the whole world? The answer lies in geography and geology. You see, Nauru sits at the intersection of ocean currents teeming with fish. And there are no predators on this island. All of this attracted birds immensely. They felt safe here, settled in huge colonies, and kept crapping here for hundreds of thousands of years. But aren't there plenty of islands in the ocean where birds nest in massive numbers? However, Nauru is not just a comfortable island for birds. It is also an ancient volcano that is shaped like a bowl with a depression in the middle. Moreover, there are no rivers on this island that could wash all these deposits into the ocean. So everything that was crapped out in Nauru stayed in Nauru, until all these millions of tons of this stuff were needed by humanity to increase agricultural productivity. At the beginning of the 20th century, the British, Australians, and New Zealanders begin industrial extraction of these fertilizers, thanks to which a massive pile of money lands on the government of Nauru, and they start spending it impulsively. And the list of their purchases looks very much like the shopping list of someone to whom Mr. Beast handed his credit card and 1 hour to spend all the money on it. The government of Nauru buys a huge skyscraper in Australia. Essentially, it is as if some random district in Yonkers suddenly bought itself the One World Trade Center tower in Manhattan. They buy hotels and real estate in Sydney, Nagoya, Guam, Fiji, and Washington. But all of this has one but, which we will return to later. And now let me remind you, the country's area is 21 square kilometers, and the entire road around the island is 19 kilometers long. What does the country need most of all? That's right, air travel. For that, Nauru buys 5 Boeing airplanes, which also have one but. They sponsor a musical in London, organize a national soccer team, create an oil company, and even form their own army, for which a bureaucratic apparatus is created and salaries are assigned. And yes, you guessed it right, all of this also has one but. Having no large internal demand, Nauru creates its own mobile operator, connects to the internet, and launches state television, all so that 10,000 local residents feel like kings of this world. The government of Nauru literally buys the loyalty of its citizens. Money is handed out just like that. How much? Who knows? Nobody counted. I remember how my grandmother once walked out of the bank with a pillowcase stuffed full of money and spent all of it. The profits from phosphates are so enormous that the state does not collect income tax, pays for healthcare and education, and on holidays even gives away household appliances. Everyone simply lives on benefits and does not really strain themselves with work. Do you want to fly abroad to study? There is money. We will pay for everything. Do you want to fly abroad for medical treatment? There is money. We will pay for everything. You are tired and want to fly abroad to relax? There is cash. We will pay for everything if you serve as an official with us. By the way, about officials, let me remind you. The country's area is 21 square kilometers. The entire road around the island is 19 kilometers long. What do our officials need most of all? That's right, Mercedes, BMWs, and Cadillacs. So, wait, what do you mean someone wants to fly abroad to relax? Isn't Nauru itself a paradise island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that you would never want to leave? Well, now definitely not, because at first the British mined phosphates on the island very carefully, then a little less carefully, and then, as usual. Look, the island is literally sliced off layer by layer. The bird stuff is loaded onto ships, and the fertile soil together with destroyed vegetation is dumped into the ocean. But when Nauru gains independence in 1968, do they stop the aggressive mining and begin restoring the island? Of course not. Now they receive all the money from phosphate sales themselves and do not even think about stopping. As a result, the island turns into this. All that ultimately remains of the paradise is lifeless fields of 15-meter limestone spikes overgrown with weeds. Forests disappear. The only underground source of fresh water on the island is depleted and polluted, and any kind of agriculture becomes simply impossible. But are those really problems when there is money? Water and food can just be brought by ships from Australia, right? They can't. Only later, this will turn into very serious trouble. And right now there is an even bigger problem. The bird stuff is gone. And along with it, life in all-inclusive mode is gone as well. The government stops handing out money to citizens, and imported food products are very expensive. Here, for example, is the price of a watermelon. These are Australian dollars. Imagine if, in your grocery store, a watermelon cost $3,000. Here is the price of cauliflower. Now, because growing their own food on the island has become impossible and money has become scarce, the residents of Nauru are forced to consume the cheapest, fattiest, and most unhealthy imported food. Fresh water also has to be brought from Australia or collected as rainwater, and it costs more than soda that is full of sugar. That is why Nauru becomes the world leader in obesity. Right now, 95% of the island's residents are overweight. The average person weighs 100 kilograms. This is where the highest percentage of diabetes cases is found, and amputations are very common. These people are not used to labor. Unemployment in the country is 80%, and the World Health Organization has recognized Nauru as the most smoking country in the world. But you might think this is the end, because Nauru finds a new way to make Nauru great again. By the way, this is the Parliament of Nauru, just a parliament of regular guys who look like they came here not to decide the fate of the country, but to wait for a bus for a field trip. But one day they actually think about the future, and in the 1970s they create a special fund where money will be stored for the moment when the bird stuff on the island runs out. They collect billions of dollars into its accounts. Only later this fund simply disappears somewhere. They say it was stolen by those very little salary-stealing gnomes. So what does the government of Nauru do then? All the offices and warehouses that they built on their island turn out to be unnecessary and now simply stand empty. All the skyscrapers and hotels that they bought in other countries have no competent management and generate only losses. The musical about Leonardo da Vinci closes after a month. The losses amount to $4 million. Maybe the Nauru Oil Company brings income. Want a joke? There are no oil deposits on the island. That's right, but there is an oil company. And then, in this parliament, a conversation happens approximately like this. I gathered you to remind you that we, actually, kind of run a country and all that, and the country has run out of money because in its depths, the bird stuff has run out. Minister of Finance, tell us, What share of the country's income was provided by the bird stuff? 100%. I propose we act on the principle saved means earned. If our creditors seize our foreign real estate, we will no longer have to pay for its maintenance. We can stop spending money on fuel for our airplanes at airports in other countries. Then they will arrest our airplanes, and we will no longer have to take losses every time 5 people fly on a plane designed for 150. Minister of Finance, do you have any ideas? Well, we can buy white dye and sell our own product under the guise of bird stuff. Any other options? We can use our army to make territorial claims against our neighbors. How large is our army? Exactly 0 people. Full strength. Understood. Call the Russians. Nauru simply has no ordinary financial mechanisms left to start earning money and recover. And then they come up with a brilliant idea. Let me tell you a real story from my life. When I was in 5th grade, a classmate of mine approached me. He was actually pretty good at math, but that time he didn't understand something in the homework. He was very upset about it and asked to copy mine. And he said something like, "You know, I was thinking, if school doesn't work out too well for us, when we grow up in principle, we could go into crime." Well, something also did not add up in Nauru's math, and they decide to go into crime. Phosphate reserves on the island run out approximately by the 1990s. At the same time, world prices for phosphates also fall. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapses, and the criminal Russian groups that emerge on its ruins are in serious need of certain services. Nauru begins selling citizenship of its country. $25,000, and anyone who wants gets a new passport, a new name, and a new biography. Absolutely officially. And since Nauru is a country recognized by the international community, with this passport there appears the possibility of opening bank accounts in Europe and the possibility of traveling across Asia without visas. So you can guess for yourself who, besides Russians, buys these passports. But Nauru does not stop there. They begin trading banking licenses. Anyone can pay money and obtain their own pocket bank without any inspections, without offices, without employees, and without reporting, and conduct any operations through this bank. Thanks to this, Nauru becomes for the whole world a real criminal paradise in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. American intelligence agencies estimated that Russian organized crime groups alone laundered $70 billion this way. After that, in 2002, the United States declares Nauru a state facilitating money laundering and threatens to impose sanctions on this island. And Nauru, in order to avoid starving to death because of these sanctions, has to shut down this operation and stop helping criminal structures and terrorist organizations. But Nauru still needs money, and periodically they receive various payments, like compensation for environmental damage from countries that once mined on their land, and for selling their own ass. Oh, I mean, for selling their vote in the United Nations. At first, they receive money from Taiwan for recognizing it as the real China, and later they receive money from Beijing and recognize Beijing as the real China instead. Nauru also received money from Russia for recognizing Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Tourism on the island is not developed. All the beaches are covered with trash, including rusting luxury cars that they once bought for themselves. As I already said, they have major problems with food and with water. They even have to desalinate ocean water, and that is a very inefficient and extremely expensive process for a country without cheap energy resources. Once, Nauru ranked second in the world in GDP per capita, right after Saudi Arabia. But now they have fallen dozens of positions down in that ranking. However, here, at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, lies something that could once again make this island rich. Some strange lumps. Nauru is preparing to make money from mining these stones on the ocean floor. These stones are called polymetallic nodules, and they contain various metals that are necessary for batteries, electronics, and the entire future human economy. Different countries are already at the starting line, ready to vacuum these things up. But mining these stones will most likely lead to the complete destruction of living organisms on the ocean floor, and it is very likely to affect the ocean's ability to absorb carbon from the atmosphere, which in turn will accelerate global warming. And how does everyone not care about this? In reality, countries still cannot agree on all of this under international maritime law because essentially this territory belongs to no one, or rather, it belongs to everyone and is considered the common heritage of mankind. So, in theory, the profits from the seabed in this territory should be shared by all countries. Nauru does not have enough money to begin the expensive extraction of resources from the ocean floor, but there is a Canadian private company, the Metals Company, that wants to participate in dividing this pie on behalf of some country, and this company offered Nauru cooperation. You might ask, if the company is Canadian, why does it not act on behalf of Canada? Now I will explain. You see, in the whole system of international maritime law, there is a tricky mechanism. When someone, for example a wealthy country or a company sponsored by such a country, submits an application to extract resources from the ocean floor, they are required to study the mining area and divide it into two parts of equal value. One part goes to the one who submitted the application and conducted the research, and the second part goes into a reserve bank of sites for developing countries. Nauru is a developing country, and therefore it has the right to these reserved sections of the ocean floor, which Nauru, for its own benefit, intends to transfer to the disposal of a private company. And they are not the only developing country that does this. When international mining rules are developed and approved, including rules for minimizing damage to local ecosystems, Nauru will be required to ensure that this Canadian company follows all these rules. But the question is, how will they do that without having the necessary specialists in this field? Most likely, the same way they destroyed their own island, they will allow the destruction of the ocean floor. That is why many believe that the Metals Company chose Nauru specifically because a state with a destroyed economy has fewer real capabilities to control the process. And how will our story about Nauru end? Subscribe.